I raised this up and I said, oh crap.
This video is sponsored by Fabletics.
So this morning I have a Perkins, I think it's what they call a 3A152 three-cylinder diesel engine here, 152 cubic inch, most likely out of a Massey Ferguson tractor. I don't know for sure what it's out of. My customer brought this in as a bare block he had purchased from a salvage yard to replace the one they're working on that was completely destroyed. Had lost a rod, kicked it out through the side. So they brought this block in, wanted me to clean it up, check it over, see what it needed, and for me to install the sleeves. I didn't think that was anything special, so I didn't bother getting the camera out to photograph any of this because, again, simple routine job, nothing to see here. After it was clean and checked, I set it up and recut the upper counterbore here. This does have a flanged sleeve in here. Pushed my dry liners in, moved over to the cylinder hone, honed the inside, get the finish on them just like I wanted, moved back over here to the surfacing machine expecting to cut the deck because these sleeves are to be installed flush to 4 thousandths below the surface. Now that's a little unusual, but they are flush to 4 thousandths below. After recutting the counterbores, I knew they were going to be too deep, so I figured I'd get the sleeves all finished and everything, and then I'd come back over here and surface the deck of the block to get me in that 0 to 4 thousandths below range. That's when I had the oh crap moment. And if any of you out there are people that do any type of work like this, carpentry, machine work, auto mechanics, ditch digging, I don't care what it is, you all know about what an oh crap moment is. And let me show you what that was. This machine was already set up with this head when I very first started on this, and the last thing this machine had been used for was when Nicholas surfaced that 5.9 Cummins head that he made a video about a couple weeks ago. Hadn't done anything on this machine since that time, and I never gave it any thought that I needed to check anything off special, other than I knew I needed to change the cutter. It was in here, so I changed the cutter and I set up and did the work. So now that I've come back off the hone and I'm getting ready to surface, I need to change to the big fly cutting head to surface the deck. So let me run through real quick what I did with that. As usual, loosened up the bolts on the boring head, slipped the carousel under here, came down on it, took the last nut off. You always drop at least one of these washers and nuts, just like I did there. I raised this up and I said, oh crap. So let me show you what I found. When Nicholas was using this as a surfacing head instead of a boring head, any of you that do machine work know that when you have a fly cutter going across, you have to actually tilt the head of the machine ever so slightly to one side so the leading edge of your cutter does the cutting. But if it's tilted a little bit one direction like this, the back side of that cutter will not drag across the surface of the block. If you have it trammed in so it's perfectly perpendicular to the surface, that trailing edge will leave marks across there. Sometimes that makes a difference, sometimes it doesn't. In the case of that head Nicholas was surfacing, where it had a piece of casting up here where he had to run up to that spot and stop, that would leave a trailing edge back here, and the surface would not be perfect the way you wanted. So to compensate for that, you tilt the spindle ever so slightly so only the leading edge cuts. And the way we do that on this machine is we put a very thin feeler gauge under one side where that mounts up underneath on the machine here. And that ever so slightly will tilt this head so only the leading edge over here does the cutting. But if you're boring and that shim is in there, it is not going to cut the counterbore square all the way around. This block, since I was planning on coming back and surfacing the deck down, whatever it needed, I didn't even measure around the outside of those counterbores when I cut them. I just ran down till they cleaned and cut them all to match the worst one. And now when I pull this head off and I see this shim laying in there, that was my oh crap moment, because I know that I cut every one of these counterbores at a slight angle. So it's on me. I should have checked the machine a little bit closer. I did talk to Nicholas about this, and we've kind of decided that if we ever leave, ever do something special like that to the machine and leave it that way, we need to make a note or take that shim back out of there so the next guy that comes along. And I've worked in this shop so many years here by myself, I'm not used to having anyone else mess with my machines and do something like leaving a shim under one side of that cutter. So it's on me. But anyway, I did go ahead and switch over to the big fly cutter surfacing head, and I did run the surface here. It took 2 thousandths off to clean up. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to attempt to pull these sleeves back out and see if I can recut the counterbores, make them right, and hopefully reuse the sleeves again. If not, I'll order up a new set.
So while Dad's out there fixing a mistake that I guess was kind of my fault, I figured I'd do something a little less stressful. When I get home from the shop, the first thing that I do is ditch the work clothes and change into something clean and comfortable. Lately, that's been the sponsor of today's video, Fabletics, and if you haven't checked them out yet, right now is the time. When you sign up as a VIP, you get up to 80% off of your first order and up to 50% off every day after that. Each month, your membership gives you a credit for a 2-piece outfit or any item up to $100, and you can skip any month between the 1st and the 5th, no charge. Their stuff just fits right. It's stretchy, breathable, and built with details that make sense, like zip pockets and sweat-wicking fabric. The kind of stuff that you actually notice when you're wearing it. Perfect for winding down, cooking dinner, or getting a light workout in. The weather's been cooling off, so I've been loving their sweats and this plaid jacket. It's comfy enough for a walk with my daughter, but it's also nice enough for all those holiday get-togethers that the rest of the family has planned. And guys, it's not just men's gear. You can grab something for your wife too, because Fabletics has women's activewear and even scrubs, so you can cross-shop with your membership and look like you planned ahead. So while Dad's fixing that mistake, at least it looks like I've got my life somewhat together, and I'm doing it with Fabletics. Sign up to be a VIP today and get 70 to 80% off the whole site by clicking the link in the description or using the QR code.
Normally when we do a block like this to remove the sleeves, the old ones in there, I'll just set it up on the machine here and we just bore them out to where they're paper thin. We have some videos out there showing that. But this one, since I want to try to salvage these sleeves, and they were just installed, they didn't go in super hard, I'm hoping I can pull them out. And I happen to have this tool here that actually my dad made probably 40 plus years ago. That's something he built for me when I very first opened up in business. He was just an old farmer, kind of cobbled things together. Pretty crude welding, but it worked. Looks like he used a flange off a water pump here, and this appears to be a throwout bearing. I can't tell you what it's out of. And then he just made up this crosshead here to sit over the block. And I'm going to have to go turn myself a slug to go down in the bottom that will fit that cylinder. And then we'll use a piece of all thread on here and a bolt. We'll crank this and see if we can pull those up out of there. So let me go to work on the slug first. I looked around the shop here to see what I might have for a slug to go down in there and pull on the bottom of that sleeve. And the only thing I could come up with was this old driver here. I'm not sure what it was. in its first life. It looks like it's actually been modified several times already. But I think if I mount that up here in the crank grinder, I can grind it down to the correct OD to fit my sleeve. I'll grind this outside down to fit up inside that bore, and maybe even come back and grind the other side a little bit smaller to act as a pilot up inside that. So let me see if we've got this relatively close to center. Yeah, I think that will work for what we need to do here. And measuring across the outermost surfaces of it right now, I'm about 3.7, maybe not quite 50. Bringing the grinding wheel in. I'm adjusted so I'm just a few thousandths away. I'm gonna check my jaws here one more time. Yeah, make sure it's tight. Let's turn the grinder on. So I'm gonna have to go down, see 50, 60, about 70 thousandths of an inch. There, we've touched off. So I'm going to set my degree wheel here on the grinder for 70 thousandths. I hate doing jobs like this because it's kind of hard on the grinding wheel. Always end up having to dress quite a bit off again before you go back to actually grinding a crankshaft that you want to have straight and true. But you do what you got to do sometimes. Okay, that's about half of where we need to be. That should knock the sharp edge off. And measuring, we are about 20 thousandths under from what the inside of the block bore will be. So that should give us plenty of clearance so we don't mess up the block doing this. So I'm going to flip this around the other way. That should get us a pretty good spot. Take my spacer back out. Now I need to grind this portion down small enough so it will go inside our cylinder liner that I believe is 3.622. I need to go back check the measurements again, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Okay, it's a good thing I went back and checked my numbers because I need to be 3.6 inch. So I've got a little ways to go on this one. And I want to come over to the side here just as close as I can, probably till my wheel just about bumps the chucks. There, I'm up against the chucks, the jaws of the chuck. So back off from that just a little. There, I can hear it starting to fry. I'm getting close. There we go. Okay, based upon where we left off with the other side of this and my markings here, I have about 50 thousandths to go to be back down to the same size as what we ground the left side of this driver. And I believe we stopped on the other side at about 3.620 or 665. Okay, right there I think is where we stopped with the other side. I'll let that spark out just a little bit. And let's check our size. Yeah, we are very close to 3.665, and I want to be at 3.6. Excuse me, 3.6 when we are done. So let me indicate 65 thousandths here on the wheel, and we'll start grinding again. There we have about 35 to go. 25, there's 20, 15, 10, 5, and there we are at 0. We'll let it spark out a little bit. And I need to measure that, see if that is in fact where I want to be. 3.6. I think that's a real good place to be. Deburr that edge just a little bit with the file. So I looked at this a little bit closer, and this driver that I ground down, I had intended on it going into the cylinder like this on the bottom side and pulling the sleeve up out of there. But my crank grinder leaves a radius edge in here, and I don't have a good way to square that up. So I got looking at it, and the bottom of the bore of this block is open in such a manner that I can turn this driver over and just use the square cut side here up against the bottom of the cylinder, and I think that'll work for me. So then I also have a piece of all thread to go through and a kind of a stepped washer on this side to go on and hold square in there, and then screw a nut on the bottom side. So let me see if I can slip that all down in here. I'd like to be able to show you this a little bit better, but I'm working by myself here today. So you're just going to have to bear with me. That does fit up in between the mains pretty well, and we'll sit across them. And now I can drop my all thread down in here through the hole. I can put this washer on. And the nut. Bring that all up so that driver sits up in the pocket there on the bottom of the cylinder. Okay, that all feels good. I'll keep that in place. And then my bridge goes on, and the thrust bearing fits over that and makes this all spin easier. It's a water pump flange there and another nut. And to keep it from turning on the bottom, I'm going to put a pair of vice grips on that nut. If I can find it there. I'll hold that from the bottom and a wrench from the top here. And let's see if I can start pulling that sleeve. Well, would you look at that? Look how easy that comes out of there. And I want to mark this so that I can possibly get it back in the exact same position again. So I'm going to take the engraver, I'm going to make a mark that lines up with each of those bolt holes on the outside of the sleeve. It won't bother anything there. I'm going to try to put a 2 on there so I know that was in the number 2 cylinder. Okay, let's see if we can bring that on up out of there. That's actually working pretty slick. Okay, I'm up against the bridge here with that sleeve, so I'm going to have to back off, and we'll put some spacers in between there so that we can come on up a little higher. And I think what we could use is some of these rings that are actually for setting up blocks in this machine. Yeah, if I put one on each side like that, why then we can gain that much more. Okay. And I'm going to say we'll have to do exactly the same thing again. Okay. Now one more time. It's good I have lots of these. I'm going to put a little oil on that. I'd hate to have those threads start going bad partway through. It's a long sleeve. And it's wanting to turn, so I'm going to gently grip my threaded rod there, keep it from turning. There we go. That's much better. There it is. Now I'm also going to make a little mark on the side on the bottom here so I can get that back in exactly the same position. And there. We have the first sleeve removed. Came out nice. I think we can reuse that again. This is actually working much better than I thought it might. And it wants to turn. So I'm going to have to hold it from the bottom. There's always, no matter what tool you have, it seems like there's always things you can do to improve it. Boy, you would think, there we go, I can just pull that one out. I was just getting ready to say, you would think I'd be able to just pull that out of there. And I did. And I should be able to start cranking this out. And there it is, it's coming up. That is just pretty slick. Okay, I want to mark that again. Okay, let's continue bringing it up. And I think we can come out of there now. Yes, there it is. We have all three of the sleeves back out. You can see these counterbores I cut in here, but knowing that this head had a shim up under this side here, I know it will have cocked it slightly this direction, And I know when we go back and check, and I'll show you that, I'll bet these are cut deeper on the right-hand side than the left side. And I didn't measure that when I was doing them because I was only worried about cleaning them up and knowing they would be square on the bottom. And I know my machine cuts them square in the bottom unless my little helper had put a shim under there that I was unaware of. And that's on me. I'm not going to come down on him for that because he did what he needed to do the job he was doing. But next time, I'm just going to ask that he maybe put a sticky note on the machine that says, hey, there's a shim under here, because it bit me in the butt. Crap. I hate that happen. Hate when those things happen. Such a waste of time. So anyway, let me get set up and we'll recut those. Okay, I'm going to show you here that this is just as I suspected. Because of having the shim under one side of that boring head that Nicholas was actually using as a fly cutter, that has caused that head to cut deeper on what is my right-hand side here than on the left side. So if I set this dial indicator to 0 and I check on what is my right-hand side of this counter bore, not much of a ledge there to sit on. Keep slipping off. That is cut about, I'm going to say 151 thousandths deep, because I've zeroed here, and there is 50, 100, 50, 1,000ths deep. Now if I go to the left side of this counter bore, you will see that it is only cut about 100 and, get in the back corner of that, maybe 149 thousandths or a little less deep. If I jump right across the bridge between the two cylinders into the next one, we're back up to the 151 again. I go to the left side, 149. I just jump across the bridge to the right side of the last cylinder there. We're closer to the 151. I go to the other side over here, and we're in that 149 range. Now, when I initially cut these counter bores, my only concern was that they cleaned up. I was not looking for a specific depth, although I did make them all the same. It just happened that once I cut the first one, the other two also cleaned up at the same dimension, but I was not worried about the actual depth because I was going to put the sleeves in and then deck the block, because our finished dimension is from flush to 4 below with the sleeve. So I thought I can make everything work like that. But at this point, all I can do, I've got the sleeves back out of there. We'll put some color on there. My cutter is still set up from when I did these the first time, so I don't have to do any changes there. I've taken the shim out. I know everything is right again. Let's recut these, and at worst, if I have to go too deep, at the worst, I can put a shim under each sleeve. They do make shims for this engine, but I'm hoping I can save it without. So let's see what happens. Okay, so I've added some color to this counter bore area, not only so you folks can see, but so I can see as I work on this. And we'll lower the centering finger down in here. Let's center the machine up real well on that. I think that's about as good as we're going to get. Now this is the same cutter I used when I did these the first time. Okay, I'm going to start feeding down. Okay, it's just touching where we left off on the outside before. So I'm just going to carefully keep coming down till we touch. Okay, I can see in on this side over here, I'm just now starting to remove some of the color. So I'm going to zero my Z axis reading here and feed down ever so slowly until we clean up the entire bottom of that counterbore. This is very much like what we had to do the first time, except hopefully this time we're cutting square. I'm assuming it's going to take about 2 thousandths or maybe just a little bit better to do this. Okay, according to my DRO, that's 2.5 thousandths. And it appears to be completely clean all the way around, but it did cut over here first and took the 2.5 to clean up over here on the right hand side. So I'm going to zero the DRO and we will cut the same amount on each of the other two so that once again all three will be alike. We'll change the camera angle just a little bit and move to the next cylinder. I see just a little bit of color over here yet. There's 0 on the DRO. And it has just barely skimmed all of the color off. We'll come up out of there. Let's move over to the last cylinder. And we are completely out of focus here, out of the frame. I don't know if my camera slipped just a little or what happened. And I can see it, 2.5. It has just barely cleaned the color off on this left side, which is what I expect. So I'll gradually keep coming down here. Now I've got a half to go. I can still see a little bit of color on over on this side. Let me move down that last 0.5 thousandths. There we're at 0. And it is clean. So not hard to do, just not what I was expecting to have to do. Our dimension of what these are supposed to be is 148 to 152 below. So there's with the indicator on 0. 152, 151, about 151, 151, 151, 151. So I'm anywhere 151 to 152 on these counterbores. This first one here, I'm a little bit deeper. See, actually, I guess that is number 3 cylinder. It's running just a little bit deeper than the other two, but at least they're the same distance, same depth from side to side. I've definitely corrected that problem. So I think now I can clean this up and we'll press the sleeves back in and see how everything looks at that point. So I think we're ready to reinstall the sleeves again. I'm going to put just a little light coating of press fit lube around the top of each cylinder here. And likewise, I'm going to put a little on the bottom of the sleeve. I wanted to try to put them back as close to the same position as I could to what they were when I'd had them in before. Goes pretty easy. Now if I knew where my big hammer was, here it is. Knew it had to be here somewhere. And we'll just tap these down in. I always like to blow that out just before the sleeve goes all the way down in case there is any debris or anything that inadvertently ended up in that area. That looks good. Sleeve is in the correct position. Now then, I need a driver that is about the size of the counterbore because that sleeve will be slightly recessed. Center that up good. I would say it's there. Slightly below the deck surface, not by much, but I can feel it is just a little bit lower. And our spec is 0 to 4. Once I get these all in, we will measure that and see where we came out. Get this sleeve started. They are pretty much light, tight slip fit. I know when I put them in the first time, this one was the tightest of the three. It took just a little bit more persuasion. Blow this out in case there's any chips of any kind. Okay, there we're to the top of the block anyway. So now the last sleeve. I call that good. And if I remember right, this sleeve went in pretty easy the first time. Yeah, there it goes. It's not going to take much to get it into place. So now the last little bit. I'd say that is it. So now let's get our indicator out. So I'm 0 there. In fact, I'm going to put a different pointer on. This one is basically a pinpoint, and it worked good for down in those counterbores, but it's hard to measure up on the top edge. I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but I went and got a indicator point to go on here that is a little bit more of a, it's actually a ball on the end, and it will work much better for checking the top edge of those sleeves. Now remember, our spec on this is from flush to 4 thousandths below. So 0 to 4. And right there, we are measuring 2 thousandths. Over here again, between the cylinders, we're 0. Over onto the edge of that one, 2 thousandths. This one here, maybe 2.5. 0 in between, 2 thousandths. 0, close to 3. On this side over here, we are 2.5. I like where those came out. I think we're in good shape. Let me check from front to back. There's 0, 2, 0 to 2, 0, 2, 0, 2. There's 0, a little over 2, 0, a little over 2. Okay, we managed to save this. So that part came out fine. But now I'm wondering about our bore size, because I did have those sleeves finished when they were installed. So let's go back inside and see if it changed anything on the inside. And I'm going to say it did not. These were pre-finished sleeves from the factory. But once you press them in, if there's any distortion whatsoever in the block, it will show up on the inside of that sleeve. My specification is from 5/10 on the minus side 0, 5/10 to the plus side. And they were all finished into the plus side. I mean, that one's right on the borderline of being too big. I don't think it wouldn't be a big deal. Like that one there, we're like 3/10,000ths bigger than it should be. There's a little bit of taper in there. I've got about 3/10ths different from top to bottom. But on a pre-finished sleeve that is pressed into an old block and then honed to take the high spots out, I think we have come out very well. So there, our block is done. I hope I have managed to save this part of it. But yeah, that was definitely an oh crap this morning when I went to change this head and found that shim under there. I thought, oh no, everything I did is going to be wrong. And it was. But we've managed to come back and correct it and salvage the product here. No harm done. Learning lesson for me and Nicholas that when we do something weird on the machine like that, leave a note on the machine so the next guy knows that you need to make some adjustments. So anyway, be sure to follow, like, watch, buy some merch. Give us your comments of what you think of what I did here to save my tail after I made the mistake on this block. Did I do what needed to be done to make it right for the customer? I think I have, but let's hear what you have to say. Thanks. See you later.